13, 14. Is it good?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
If you want to flip that. You're good, Ian. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I've said worse.
Rob, you want me to go ahead and start the stream? At 3?
In 2 minutes.
3:30?
Yeah.
Can you go to his office and get it?
You want me to? Yeah, 3:30. Have you fed him today?
Yeah, I said this morning.
Okay.
You forgot.
Just yeah, I forgot. I'm gonna pop over there and just see. How often can I just come in again? I'm getting a press conference on. I got it. Hey, that op-ed looks good.
Maybe on the road.
Good afternoon.
All right, Pool, you ready? Are you good? All right, Judge, consider whenever you can.
I'm here with Commissioner Rodney Ellis, Precinct 1 Commissioner, Christian Menifee, our county attorney, and who is ready to answer questions as well. I'll give my remarks in English, then Spanish, and we'll hear from County Attorney Menifee, Commissioner Ellis, and we'll take questions. Today we're taking action to help elevate voices in our community that have been set aside for too long. For too long, transportation policy in our region has been stuck in the 50s. For a generation, we've gone on just building more lanes, putting down more concrete, thinking that somehow magically that's going to reduce traffic and that's going to make us more competitive. All the while, what we've done is created more flooding problems, exacerbated instead of solving traffic, and built bigger and wider highways while turning into one of the last urban areas worldwide without a comprehensive public transportation system. We cannot continue to support transportation policy that prioritizes cars over people. The current system maximizes the number of cars that can be on the road at any one time, as opposed to maximizing the ability of people to get to where they need to go. Basically, we've for decades been prioritizing highways over the ability to get around. We need to be smarter about this. The way we build should not focus on what's easiest for cars. It should focus on what improves quality of life. That is not only the right thing to do, but it is necessary to make sure that our region remains competitive as the world continues to evolve and we work to retain and recruit the smartest people into our region. This wouldn't be possible without our new county attorney, Christian Menefee, and his team. Since taking office, they've been fighting on several fronts, particularly on this one, and they're leading the charge to ensure that our community is not disadvantaged or taken advantage of when it comes to transportation policy. Even in the midst of a pandemic, with all the challenges that entailed, with the winter storm his team had to face and help us address, he's been able to focus on equity, on our competitiveness, and I appreciate the team's work on that. Since the beginning of this process, we've been good faith partners to TxDOT. We've done everything we could to try and move this project forward, but it's come time to seek legal recourse. I personally have spoken with the leaders of TxDOT multiple times. Both the City of Houston and Harris County have retained experts to present specific and well-developed alternatives to the plans that TxDOT has presented. We have convened meetings, we've proposed memorandum of understanding, we've worked with the community, we've sat down and spoken with them time and time again. But time after time, TxDOT has done nothing more than give us and our community lip service. They've made promises they can't keep, bulldozing right through us with this process. Today, the county attorney has filed a lawsuit that asks our courts to have TxDOT go back and properly consider our concerns and the impacts that this project will have. Our hope by filing this lawsuit is we'll have a fair shot through the judicial system. For years, our community has been fighting this. And as leaders in our community, we are determined to use any lever of government we can to change the trajectory of this project and advocate for the future of this county. The bottom line is this. This project is bad for traffic, this project displaces communities, and the project is bad for our health. It won't solve our traffic problems. We've seen this movie before. We know through studies and experience that wider highways just means more congestion. Traffic volumes on I-45 have been decreasing since 2008. And one analysis of the Katy Freeway showed that the $2.8 billion widening of that freeway actually increased average commute times for roughly 85% of the drivers who use that 23-lane road. Our expert projections show that the current proposed plan would decrease traffic in the very, very short term, only for it to continue increasing again and for congestion to increase. This project displaces communities. Like many highways in the past, this project will have significant impacts in neighborhoods and businesses, particularly low-income neighborhoods. The communities that were divided to build I-45 have had no voice in this and had no voice in how the initial highway was created. We're looking at the repeat of this inequity. 1,079 residential housing units. That includes both single-family and multifamily housing. 344 businesses, 5 places of worship, and 2 schools would be displaced by this project. The level of displacement far exceeds that of others in our area, including the expansion of I-10, 290, or other highway construction around the country. Finally, this project is bad for our health. Schools located near freeways already see much higher rates of asthma than other schools. At least 26 schools and daycares will be brought within 500 feet of the freeway. That will increase air and noise pollution. It'll increase the asthma rates, and we know that we are the most dangerous region in the country when it comes to traffic accidents. Wider highways do not make the highway safer for drivers and the community. The decision on what kind of highway we build is a decision about what place we want to live in. Currently, we're the most dangerous urban area, traffic accidents. Currently, too many people in Harris County don't have a car or the ability to get to their work, to get to where they need to be through appropriate transit. Currently, leading employers in Harris County and citizens and residents claim the lack of adequate transportation as one of the key challenges in our region. We can tackle those challenges. We can build a highway that respects communities, that respects the need to prepare for the future, that respects children, that includes within it significant investment for transit options. We can prepare for the challenges of the future rather than being stuck in a transportation model that the rest of the country and frankly the rest of the world outgrew decades ago. I'll repeat my remarks in Spanish and then we'll hear from County Attorney Menefee. Por mucho tiempo han sido ignoradas las voces del cambio que vamos a elevar el día de hoy. La política de transporte en nuestra región ha estado atrapada en los años 50. Hemos seguido construyendo más carriles, virtiendo más concreto, ampliando carreteras, construyendo más carreteras y pretendiendo que algún día el tráfico simplemente va a desaparecer. Mientras tanto, lo que hemos hecho es crear más problemas de inundaciones, exacerbar el tráfico en lugar de resolverlo y construir carreteras más grandes, más anchas, más largas, mientras nos convertimos en una de las últimas áreas urbanas en el mundo sin un sistema de transporte público integral. No podemos seguir apoyando una política de tránsito, de transporte, que dé prioridad a los automóviles y no a las personas. La manera en la cual se han diseñado las carreteras, las autopistas en este condado por muchas décadas maximiza la cantidad de automóviles, más no la habilidad de los individuos de llegar de un sitio a otro. Maximiza las autopistas en lugar de la capacidad de viajar, de llegar. Debemos ser más inteligentes, más creativos. Debemos construir lo que mejore la calidad de vida y la competitividad de esta región. Solo así nos aseguraremos de que podamos seguir reclutando y podamos seguir invitando y reteniendo a los líderes, los jóvenes más talentosos aquí en la comunidad del Condado Harris. Esto no sería posible sin nuestro nuevo abogado del condado, Christian Menefee, su equipo, han trabajado mucho para proteger a la comunidad en cuanto a esta carretera, han trabajado también en la tormenta, la helada que tuvimos con el reto del coronavirus. Él y su equipo han luchado y nos están ayudando ahora con este proyecto. Ha llegado el momento de trabajar vía las cortes y el sistema legal para proteger al condado Harris contra un proyecto de carretera que realmente no tiene sentido ni razón. Desde el principio de este proceso hemos sido buenos comunicadores, hemos trabajado muy de cerca con el sistema de transporte del Estado. Yo personalmente he hablado con los líderes del sistema de transporte TxDOT, tanto la ciudad como el condado Harris han contratado expertos que nos han ayudado a diseñar alternativas factibles y detalladas al presente proyecto. Hemos trabajado con la comunidad, hemos trabajado con los expertos, pero a lo largo de los últimos años, TxDOT simplemente nos ha ignorado a nosotros como líderes y ha ignorado a la comunidad. Hoy el abogado del condado ha presentado una demanda que pide que nuestras cortes obliguen a TxDOT a revisar los planes e incorporar los problemas que existen en el modelo, en el diseño actual. Esperamos que con esta demanda tengamos una oportunidad de mejorar el plan a través de nuestro sistema judicial. Estamos todos comprometidos a utilizar cualquier opción a nuestra disposición. El punto es este proyecto es malo para el tráfico, el proyecto desplaza a las comunidades y el proyecto es malo para nuestra salud. Hemos visto esto muchas veces, tanto la experiencia como los estudios académicos demuestran que el ampliar las carreteras no lleva a menos congestión, menos tráfico. Todos conocemos la historia de la I-10. Se ha ampliado, ahora tiene 23 carriles y de hecho esa inversión de 2.8 mil millones de dólares para ampliar aquella carretera ha incrementado el tráfico para 85% de las personas que conducen en la carretera 10. Nuestras proyecciones, las proyecciones de nuestros expertos demuestran que el diseño presente en la 45 de hecho incrementaría el tráfico, lo reduciría por muy limitada cantidad de tiempo y después de hecho crecería el tráfico y la congestión. Este proyecto también desplaza comunidades. El proyecto desplazaría 1.079 unidades residenciales, 344 negocios, 5 lugares de adoración y 2 escuelas, miles de personas. Este nivel de desplazamiento es mucho más a lo que se ha visto en otros proyectos de carretera, tanto aquí como alrededor del país. Y finalmente, el proyecto es malo para nuestra salud. Las escuelas cerca de las carreteras ya ven tasas de asma más altas que otras escuelas. Al menos 26 escuelas y centros de cuidados para niños estarían a 500 pies de la carretera con esta expansión. Eso incrementaría la contaminación atmosférica, la contaminación acústica, llevaría más enfermedades. Además, sabemos que esta región es la más peligrosa en cuanto a accidentes de tránsito por esto de las carreteras tan amplias que invitan a las personas a conducir demasiado rápidamente. Esto llevaría a más accidentes de tránsito. La decisión acerca de qué tipo de carretera construyamos es una decisión acerca de qué tipo de condado, qué tipo de ciudad queremos para nosotros y para nuestros niños. En este momento, el condado Harris es el área urbana más peligrosa en cuanto a accidentes de tránsito. En este momento, muchas personas en el condado no tienen automóviles, no tienen acceso a un sistema de transporte público significativo. En este momento, líderes de las compañías más grandes en este condado, residentes del condado, listan la necesidad de mejor transporte como uno de los retos más grandes de nuestra región. Podemos atacar estos retos, podemos construir una carretera que respete a nuestras comunidades, que minimice el tráfico, que invierta en opciones de transporte público. Debemos hacer eso para prepararnos para el futuro, en lugar de estar atrapados en un modelo de transporte que realmente el resto del mundo ya ha sobrepasado hace muchos años. I'll finish there. County Attorney Menifee, thank you so much for your leadership on this.
Thank you, Judge. Expanding I-45 in this project is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to expand our region's mobility. But we can't allow TxDOT to cut corners and fail to live up to their duty to consider environmental impacts in this project. Federal law is relatively straightforward on TxDOT's duty to consider environmental impacts. They're required to give a hard look to environmental issues and alternatives, and here TxDOT failed to do so. Very early in the process, TxDOT ruled out alternatives that would have no land expansion, that would not result in additional lanes. Early in the process, they ruled those things out, and they also failed to properly consider environmental impacts and impacts on local neighborhoods, many of which are historically underserved neighborhoods. They failed to properly consider impacts on local businesses as well as parklands. And we know that this project will displace more than 1,000 homes, more than 300 businesses, and have impacts on neighborhoods throughout the area. But TxDOT also failed to consider the recommendations that Harris County and the City of Houston worked together to present to them. Over several months, Harris County and the City of Houston engaged stakeholders and came up with recommendations with the goal of achieving a result that would not only recognize the objectives of the project, but also minimize the risks to local neighborhoods and communities. And TxDOT failed to give those recommendations a fair shake. So in this lawsuit, we're asking the court to require TxDOT to do exactly what it's supposed to do under federal law. Consider the impact to the environment, local residents, neighborhoods, communities, businesses, allow the public to participate in the process from this point forward, and consider all of those things when landing on a final design. As the county's lawyers, my office will not allow TxDOT, we will not sit back and allow TxDOT to skirt their duty to protect Harris County residents. And now I'll turn it over to Commissioner Rodney Ellis.
I learned a long time ago in government from Barbara Jordan, if somebody has said something I want to say, I don't have to say it again. I must say, as someone who's been around government a long time, I'm very proud to see the leadership of Judge Hidalgo and our new county attorney. I've had to interact with TxDOT for a long time, starting in '75 as an intern to Bill Hobby when it was a highway department, and had an old saying around the state capitol when I was an intern. The highway department's attitude was, it's our way or the highway. So I'm glad to see this county judge, Commissioner Garcia, our county attorney, willing to stand up to protect these neighborhoods. We all want this investment in our region, but it ought to be done on terms that respects people and respects property and helps us move forward as a great region. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Judge.
Any questions?
I do, Judge, I'm the pool, so I have several questions.
Go for it.
On this topic, KRID is asking, are the businesses that are going to be affected in the homes, what kind of offers are they getting from the state for their properties? Are they fair offers, do you know?
It's hard to say that this level of displacement is fair in any way. It is a level of displacement that is not appropriate, and the biggest point is it's not necessary. It's not necessary. We have proposed alternatives that would not displace these thousands of homes, places of worship, and businesses. I will tell you that the reason, and as you guys know, the federal government has now ordered TxDOT to stop their progress on this lawsuit because they've heard this groundswell of complaints from the community, including those businesses, feeling that the current setup is profoundly unfair. So I don't want to speak for them, but I will tell you in the conversations I've had with these communities and these business leaders, they're not okay with it. The vast majority of them, they're not okay with it.
And can you tell me what these specific environmental concerns are? Could you go over those?
Yeah, and I'll let the county attorney add anything, County Attorney Menifee, if I missed something. But we have to remember here the word environmental, for the purposes of the federal law under which the county is suing, is a broad word. So it's not what we think of as solely, for example, air pollution. It includes the impacts to the lived environment. And so that's why we're talking about displacement of families. We are talking about air pollution as well. We are talking about the congestion issues. Basically, the impact on the quality of life that we presented, that we said these impacts are happening, they don't need to happen, and they did not listen to our community and the leadership. They did not incorporate that feedback, and that is violative of the process that TxDOT is supposed to go through. They are supposed to study and incorporate the feedback from the community before they bulldoze the community into a project that is not appropriate.
And are there specific street locations that you're talking about that are impacted, or are you talking about the whole project?
You can see the complaint. I'm sure the county attorney's office can follow up with specific details, but there's several neighborhoods. The footprint of the highway is unnecessarily wide, and what that does is it causes environmental impacts. Air pollution for schools. It displaces schools, businesses, houses of worship. It increases traffic instead of decreasing it. It increases car accidents, as we've shown and experts have shown in our region and in other places. And it does nothing for transportation in our region. We know we need better transit. For example, the alternative we propose is to not widen it so much and instead allow room for transit options, public transportation options. If the goal is to get people from point A or point B, the goal is not simply to see how many cars you can fit into a bottled up highway. County Attorney Menifee, you have anything to add on the
No,
legal?
the only thing I'll add is that, you know, we're talking about environmental impacts. As the judge mentioned, it's a broad term that includes air and water quality, flooding and drainage issues. You have homes that won't necessarily be displaced by the widening of lanes, but the flooding issues that can be created from expanding the highway can cause runoff into those homes and increase their flooding issues. Noise issues, these are the types of impacts that we're fighting to make TxDOT go back and consider. And particularly the segments around the downtown area where the widening should be substantial. These are the places where TxDOT needs to go back to the drawing board and make sure that they're considering these issues.
On another side too, as you know, it's a year now, we're into this pandemic, and these questions are related to that. Can you reflect on the decision a year ago to shut down the rodeo? What do you remember about having that conversation leading up to that? How difficult was that decision for you to make? And looking back a year later, would you do anything different?
Yeah, about a year ago today we were learning about the first set of cases in this country and in our area. And back then, the recommendation of the health experts was you don't want to shut anything down until you have evidence of community spread. That is, that there's evidence that the virus is being transmitted within the community as opposed to just being brought from out of town. Now, there wasn't evidence of community spread before we shut down the rodeo, but I had a feeling that it was there because we weren't conducting enough tests. The federal government was not sending us the ability to conduct the tests that we needed. So my regret, and I've mentioned this before, is not having stopped the rodeo sooner. That was the day I said, okay, I don't care if we haven't found transmission. I am sure transmission's going on, we're just not catching it. We gotta shut down the rodeo. And that was the day, coincidentally, that they found community transmission at the rodeo. So that's one regret I have. I think that perhaps we would have saved some lives early on if that had been done. But look, this is an unprecedented situation. I don't think anybody knew how to deal with this, that certainly not for a century. So I think it's going to be a continued process of learning as we move through this. The bottom line is, it's not over. It's been a year. We're all tired. We wish it were over. We wish we could just take off our masks, be more comfortable, but we still only have less than 1 in 10 people in this county who are over the age of 16 who have been fully vaccinated. We still have a sky-high positivity rate, high case counts, high hospitalizations, so it's not the time to give up.
This next question in Spanish, if you would. What are your recollections from a year ago when the pandemic was declared, and what do you do differently? Basically the same thing in Spanish. Good.
Hace un año, alrededor de estos tiempos, es cuando empezamos a escuchar acerca de casos en este país, de hecho, en esta comunidad. Y en ese momento la recomendación de los expertos de salud era no cerrar nada hasta no descubrir evidencia de transmisión en la comunidad. Es decir, evidencia de que no se estaba trayendo el virus desde fuera, sino que se estaba esparciendo en la comunidad. Obviamente no teníamos esa evidencia, pero yo sabía que no se estaban haciendo suficientes pruebas para detectar todos los casos, porque el gobierno federal no nos estaba enviando las pruebas que necesitábamos. Entonces, de repente me arrepiento de no haber cerrado el rodeo antes. Después decidí yo, dije, ok, aunque no haya evidencia de transmisión comunitaria, lo vamos a cerrar porque sé que ahí está, simplemente no la estamos identificando. Y fue ese día, por coincidencia, que se identificó el primer caso transmitido dentro de la comunidad. De repente, si hubiéramos cerrado el rodeo antes, se habían salvado algunas vidas, pero es, bueno, algo que aprendimos. Ahora, hay que recordar que ya ha pasado un año, estamos cansados de las mascarillas, pero todavía solamente menos de 1 en 10 personas mayores de 16 años se han vacunado completamente en este condado. Tenemos una tasa de positividad altísima todavía, más de 500 casos diarios, las hospitalizaciones altas. No es momento de darnos por vencidos.
And then my final question is about a viewer to Telemundo. Was not allowed to obtain his COVID vaccine because he walked to NRG, even though he had an appointment. Now, I believe Telemundo has since made some phone calls and made it happen for that particular individual. but, how can we prevent something like that from happening again, and is there something in place for someone like that in Spanish?
Sí, estamos distribuyendo las vacunas lo más rápidamente, lo más eficientemente posible, y parte de lo que hace nuestro sistema eficiente es el distribuir las vacunas a través de autoservicio. Sabemos que hay muchas personas que no tienen automóvil, entonces por eso hay provisiones para aquellas personas que no tienen un auto, les ayudamos a que alguien los pueda recoger o les pueda acomodar para que puedan recibir la vacuna si han sido seleccionados. Entonces no podemos recibir personas a pie en la sede de NRG porque no está diseñada de esa manera. Si tendríamos que sacrificar la cantidad si fuéramos a hacer eso, pero sí podemos ayudar a aquellas personas sin acceso a un automóvil para acomodarlas a que puedan recibir la vacuna.
Good, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Doug, any questions from you?
Yeah, a few. To be clear, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding some of the nuance of this, and feel free to either the judge or the county attorney. When you say that TxDOT has failed to consider the impact, but then when you talk about 1,079 homes and 341 businesses and the 5 churches and 2 schools, that's all things that that's from TxDOT's actual document. They did consider it. So what exactly is it you're asking them to do?
So that's the displacement impact, right?
Yeah.
And we're suggesting you don't need to displace all of those people. You can have a narrower footprint. They're not incorporating that. We said you're going to cause issues with evacuations if we have a hurricane where people need to evacuate. They didn't address that. We're saying you're...
Well, I guess that's my question, is that they did address that, but they may not have addressed it satisfactorily to the outcome you wanted. That's what I'm trying to understand.
No, there's a lot of issues that were not addressed, and that's in the letter. If you can see, there's a letter that we sent on behalf of the county. It's got my signature, and it lays out very clearly all of the issues and the specific points that we've brought up that they nowhere address one way or the other, whether, what they are going to do about it. They do not address those issues. And you have to remember, the project TxDOT presented initially, compared to the project that ended up panning out right now with the FEIS, is marginally different. Marginally. It's the same thing after what they claim to be is community engagement and conversations with us. They have obfuscated, they have been stringing along the leadership, and they have not incorporated the feedback nor addressed the most crucial concerns and impacts that this project would have on the community. But it's all spelled out very, very carefully in the letter I sent on the FEIS.
And when did you send that?
Well, I have the team circle back.
Yeah, and the other part here is there are processes in place to address these issues in a correct manner. So, for example, one of the initial steps is sending out a draft environmental impact statement so that the local government, the community can weigh in on these issues and provide certain recommendations to you. Well, TxDOT didn't submit their complete draft environmental impact statement up front. Instead, they spanned it out. They had the initial one in mid-2017 and then had 8 additional technical reports. Well, how can a community member weigh in on the impact of this particular thing, this statement, if it's spanned out over 32 months in 8 different statements? And in the final environmental impact statement and their record of decision, they didn't address many of the issues that the judge just talked about and of course in her letter in late 2020 as well. So there are processes in place under NEPA, the law that we've sued under, for them to address these in the correct manner. But we have heard nothing on many of these issues, and instead they've ignored concerns that have been both from Harris County, the city of Houston, as well as community members.
The only other question I have is related to I'll go ahead and just sort of read you directly what it says. TxDOT, this is from the executive director, it said, "We were looking forward to continuing our work with stakeholders on refining the plans for the project, but these plans may now be in jeopardy due to the lawsuit." What is there a risk that you think is legitimate to there never, like this project being mired either in court or in some form of redesign that leads to the same level of inconvenience, air quality concerns, displacement impacts, because we can't get around, because the project has been challenged and dragged on for years and years.
There's a need for better transportation in the region. What we don't want is a project that either keeps things the same or makes them worse. And this project makes things worse. We need to be able to we need a project. We need improvements, not just there, throughout the transportation systems in Harris County, but we need improvements. We need to turn the page on a philosophy that was around when Eisenhower was president. And so it's incumbent on us as leaders to say we have to break out of this cycle that ultimately is going to set our region back. Now, these dollars that TxDOT is distributing, they're not their dollars. They're dollars that they receive from the federal government, hence the federal government has stopped them in their tracks. They're taxpayer dollars. The taxpayers deserve a project that benefits their community. It is unfair and it is not appropriate for a state entity to say it's either our way or you're not getting it, because that is how the community gets behind. That is how people get displaced. That is how folks unnecessarily die in car accidents from health impacts. We need to be able to do better than that. Yeah.
Doug, just because we file a lawsuit does not mean Harris County does not want to engage in dialogue. The rules are stacked pretty much in TxDOT's favor. And what gives us leverage is the lawsuit, and our federal representatives give us leverage. Having a Secretary of Transportation, Mayor Pete, there gives us leverage. Having the judges access to the White House gives us leverage. But in no way is the county attorney or the county judge saying we do not want to have dialogue. And when you talk about input, it doesn't mean just listening. When people come to us and tell us what they want, we can't just say, we hear you. We have to have some reason for being opposite to what they want. And that is not what has happened in this process.
And I'll just add two minor points here. One is a point that the judge briefly mentioned earlier, and that's that on March 8th, so just earlier this week, typically in these projects, it's the Federal Highway Administration that is managing this NEPA process, but here, that authority was delegated to TxDOT. Well, just earlier this week, the Federal Highway Administration sent a letter to TxDOT asking them to cease putting any types of bids out for RFP or taking any steps on construction of the project so that they can address issues under another federal law that deals with discrimination based on race and ethnicity. That's one. And two, TxDOT says, oh, well, we looked forward to continue to engage with stakeholders. Well, when they issued their record of decision under the NEPA process, that is TxDOT saying we believe that our obligation to analyze the environmental impacts has concluded. So those communications can continue to happen, but once they issued that record of decision, Harris County had to do what was necessary to protect our residents, and that's why we filed this lawsuit, and that's why it was approved by Commissioner's Court.
Okay, thank you all.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
see
you.
ya.
Get your bite, Doug.
What's that?
Get a bite.
I have a bite.